The wonderful experience of the Israelites as described in the earlier verses of chapter 24 naturally raise certain questions for us. God has pledged himself to his people as their friend, but how could the intimate and beautiful relationship described here at Sinai be sustained? And how could this God, who was at the same time a perfectly holy God, continue to dwell in the midst of a sinful people? The remainder of the book of Exodus is largely devoted to answering these two questions. It begins by describing the God-given plans for the building of a home for the Lord and his regulations for approaching him. These regulations are briefly given in chapter 25 verses 1 to 9, after Moses once again had gone up the mountain to meet with the Lord in chapter 24 and verses 12 to 18. But then in great detail the instructions are recorded in chapters 25 through to 31, and the subsequent response to the people is described in chapters 35 to 40. In between is the incident with the golden calf in chapters 32 and 33, and they emphasize that the people truly were still a sinful people. But before we proceed to the regulations, there are several invaluable lessons to be taught and learnt in chapter 24 verse 13 to 25 verse 9. We need to notice that the experience of grace opened the hearts of the people to give him their treasures. This is no new lesson in the book of Exodus, but it is noteworthy that it reappears here. Though the response of the people is not recorded until chapter 35, it's nonetheless significant that they produced 6.5 tons of precious metal for the tabernacle, as well as fabrics, all of which would have been very expensive materials, since in the ancient world red, purple and blue dyes were so rare that only the wealthiest people could afford them. When one compares their generosity with the giving of most of us Christians, it raises the question, how much have we experienced the grace of God if we are so miserly? The generosity of the people arose from the fact that only a few months before they'd experienced an act of God's delivering love which was greater than all their wildest hopes. How can we who stand in the shadow of Calvary, the gift of God which cost the life of his dear Son, respond less freely than did the Israelites? This passage does of course focus upon material goods. Perhaps this is because it is these things that we find most difficult to give away. However, such giving as God looks for in us is not just monetary. He looks for the best of our time, our energies, and our gifts. We should not fail to notice this repeated emphasis in Exodus and learn from it.